continue to lead the Ministry of Justice and to further advance the reformation of the sector. I wish to expressly and sincerely acknowledge the Chief Justice, the Honourable Mr. Justice Brian Sykes, the judges in the Supreme and Parish Courts, and the staff who support them for the ongoing program to modernize and transform Jamaica's justice system to first-class status. Special thanks, Mr. Speaker, to the President of the Court of Appeal, the Honourable Mr. Justice Dennis Morrison, the Judges of Appeal and the staff of the Court of Appeal, the Attorney General, my good friend, Mrs. Marlene Mullaloo-Fort, the former Solicitor General, Mrs. Nicole Foster Pusey, who now sits in the Court of Appeal, the newly appointed Solicitor General, Mrs. Marlene Aldred, who is with us, and the staff of the Attorney General's office. All of them, Mr. Speaker, for their contribution to advancing the work of Jamaica's justice system. My gratitude to the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mrs. Paula Llewellyn, and the staff of the Office of the Public Prosecutions, the Administrator General, Mrs. Lona Brown, and her staff, the newly appointed Chief Parliamentary Counsel, Ms. Judith Grant, and her staff, the Director of Legal Reform, Mr. Maurice Bailey, and his staff, the Executive Director of the Legal Aid Council, Mr. Hugh Faulkner, and his staff, and the attorneys at the Ministry of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the improvements to the justice system so far were made possible with the support of Mrs. Carol Palmer, former Permanent Secretary, who is here with us, and who did yeoman service in the Ministry of Justice. And I'm sure she's going to do a fantastic amount of work at our new ministry, Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. Special welcome to the new Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Sancia Bennett-Templer, and special thanks to the management and staff and to all the other supporting personnel and agencies of the Ministry of Justice for their hard work, dedication and commitment to the people of Jamaica. To our development partners, the European Union, the Canadian government, the United Kingdom government, the US government, the various arms of the United Nations, and the Inter-American Development Bank. To my close protection officer, Sergeant Howard Hamilton, my driver, O'Neill Ennis, but finally, but by no means least, Mr. Speaker, my wife, Patricia, and my 4 daughters, one of whom is here. Caroline and her elder sister have been taking over my law practice and doing much better than I could, which allows me to pass there every now and then and beg for lunch money and pocket money. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank them for assisting me as I pursue representational politics and duties as Cabinet Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to report the achievements of the last fiscal year under a theme, perhaps an outgoing theme, the new face of justice, and to present the plans and programs for this fiscal year as we continue the transformation to a first-class justice system. Mr. Speaker, over the last fiscal year, we have significantly advanced the reform of the justice system through the modernization of justice infrastructure, increasing access to justice services, strengthening the legislative framework, and protecting human rights and freedoms. At the start of the 2018-2019 fiscal year, we promised the Jamaican people a first-class justice system complemented by first-class facilities and first-class delivery of justice. Mr. Speaker, we are delivering on that promise. We have made considerable progress, and over the next few years, we expect every aspect of the justice system to become first class. We want and will accept nothing less. Then again, Mr. Speaker, to achieve a first-class justice system, every stakeholder must start to think, act, and deliver first-class services. I want to repeat that, Mr. Speaker. every stakeholder must start to think, act, and deliver first-class services. To begin with, Mr. Speaker, we're building first-class justice facilities. We have moved swiftly to correct some of the structural deficiencies which have existed in the justice sector, and I can confidently report that significant progress has been made. In the last fiscal year, we spent $1.3 billion to construct, rehabilitate, and refurbish 43 justice institutions, including several of the island's courts. Major infrastructural works undertaken during the past year included expansion and upgrading of the Court of Appeal, valued at $846 million, which features the addition of 3 additional courtrooms and 14 judges' chambers, as well as upgraded meeting facilities and offices. This expansion is critical to the reduction of the backlog in cases, as already the expansion has allowed for an increase in the number of judges at the Court of Appeal, and by extension, an increase in the number of cases being tried and subsequent disposal of these cases from the court system. We're expanding and upgrading the Supreme Court downtown, and during the past year, we have added 2 new courtrooms and commissioned 2 brand new elevators so people can move about the Court of Appeal much easier. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, they now have 12 courts to try criminal cases, not 6 as 3 years ago, but 12 courts to try criminal cases. And Mr. Speaker, we are upgrading all the bathrooms across the justice institutions. So, Mr. Speaker, the restrooms, we have 250 of them in the courts, and maybe other justice facilities, another 50 or so. I think, Mr. Speaker, that when people visit the courts and need to use the restrooms, they must feel that they can use the restroom in comfort. And what we intend to do, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that all of the restrooms and those areas, the holding area for persons who are charged, that they should in fact be first class. People must feel when they come to the courts that if they need to use the restroom or need to go in the courts or need to move about, that they are in world-class facilities and not feel that if they walk they might fall through the floor, as has happened in the past. And so, Mr. Speaker, all of these areas will be improved to first world, first-class status. Then again, Mr. Speaker, we are introducing modern technology, and this is a major focus in the justice reform that we are pursuing. Mr. Speaker, there's ongoing installation of audio-visual equipment, such as microphones, speakers, HD televisions, HD cameras, and computers in all 78 courtrooms. This will mean, Mr. Speaker, certainly in a short space of time, all 78 courtrooms will be able to record all the proceedings, and if approved by the Chief Justice and by the judge, they can live stream, as happened in the recent case NIDS, which was live stream audio. But in the future, Mr. Speaker, we should be able to live stream audio, visual, and this should happen before the end of this year. It has been some time in coming, Mr. Speaker, because the European Union that we depended on to provide the facilities had a little technical problem, but everything is now in place, and we hope shortly, in a matter of weeks, that these 78 rooms will be properly equipped and will be functioning so that we have a total technology to record, and so there will be no need for the judges to be writing every single sentence that is being pronounced. Another area, Mr. Speaker, is that we are introducing the electronic case management system, and this will ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we move from a paper-based court system where everything is filed with paper to a paperless system. This is part, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the courts facilitate electronic filing, better case flow management, and public access portal. The modernization of the justice system, Mr. Speaker, not only encompasses technological improvements to the island courts and investment in the physical infrastructure, but also alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, all of which are necessary for increasing access to justice services. So, Mr. Speaker, in the past 2 fiscal years, we took steps to increase alternative resolution infrastructure in the 5 parish justice centers and also in the 2 new restorative justice centers. These justice centers, Mr. Speaker, will provide more opportunities for the provision of justice services in Jamaica, as the establishment of each justice center affords us a greater platform for the promotion of peace, forgiveness, reconciliation, and restitution in our society, and take us closer to making Jamaica safe, secure, cohesive, and just. Mr. Speaker, I believe that most Jamaicans are peaceful and committed to the rule of law. The justice system must tackle the few antisocials who engage in behavior and encourage everyone to contribute and play a fundamental role in the reduction of indiscipline, violent reprisals, and generally to reduce crime and violence. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Justice is increasing access to justice services at the community level. Restorative justice, Mr. Speaker, is one of the main focus of this ministry. The culture of crime and violence is fraying the fabric of the Jamaican society. As a result, the nation's courts continue to be plagued by a perennial backlog of cases which negatively affect efficiency in the courts and hamper proceedings. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, we must embrace the concept of restorative justice as justice that heals. In addition to restorative justice, Mr. Speaker, we continued to provide other methods for alternative dispute resolution, which provide non-adversarial means of resolving disputes, to include placing emphasis on mediation. With regard to restorative justice, Mr. Speaker, we have achieved the following: 1,125 restorative justice conferences were held, wherein 1,005 ended in successful agreements, representing 89% peaceful settlement of cases. Mr. Speaker, increasingly, the courts are referring quite a number of cases to be dealt with by way of restorative practices, as 943 of the 1125 conference cases were referred from the courts. Mr. Speaker, we sensitized 6,963 persons on restorative justice, and this number does not include the more than 2,000 justices of the peace who were exposed to restorative justice in the training sessions hosted by the ministry across the island. We commenced discussions with some of our donor partners to expand mediation training, and have had several meetings with the Dispute Resolution Foundation and mediators. Mediation, Mr. Speaker, will be a major focus of the Ministry of Justice during this fiscal year and beyond. And I say, Mr. Speaker, both restorative justice and